What are the terms and conditions of success? World number 2, Naomi Osaka, shocking the tennis world when she announced late Monday she preferred to quit the French Open before her second round match rather than face another confrontation over her refusal to attend post-match press conferences. In a long statement on her social media accounts, the 23-year-old Japanese telling the world about her bouts with anxiety and depression since her first Grand Slam win in New York in 2018. Now, there's always been pressure in the high-stakes world of professional sports, pressure from fans, sponsors, coaches, and parents. Is this generation any different? Is the pressure greater? Or, in an age when social media allows athletes to curate their own image, is it a new kind of battle for control between stars, the industry, and the media? And of course, there is the issue of the toll it takes on mental health being in the limelight. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Naomi Osaka's shock decision to pull out of Roland Garros. Joining us, France 24 sports editor Simon Harding, who sampled the slow red clay of the French Open for us. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Francois.
Also with us, journalist Nita Wiggins, author of Civil Rights Baby, My Story of Race, Sports, and Breaking Barriers in American Journalism. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, and good evening.
From Lisbon, Karsten Vidlarsen, sports psychologist for Danish Super League side FCN and for Denmark's national football youth team. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
And from Verbier in Switzerland, Michael Payne, former director of marketing for the International Olympic Committee. Thursday sees the launch of your book, Tune In, the unofficial and entirely unsanctioned history of the Olympics, which features quite a number of clever cartoons. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening. Great to be with you.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation, and you have on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Now, for the record, it's the 102nd ranked Romanian Ana Bogdan who's through to the third round at Roland Garros after a walkover. And even though Osaka said in her statement she hoped, quote, everyone can get back to focusing on the tennis going on in Paris, for now, well, it's still the only topic of conversation. Fraser Jackson has more.
After being fined $15,000 for refusing to attend a press conference, the world's number 2 female tennis star Naomi Osaka has pulled out of the French Open, citing mental health reasons.
I think now the best thing for the tournament, the other players and my well-being is that I withdraw so that everyone can get back to focusing on the tennis going on in Paris. The truth is that I have suffered long bouts of depression since the US Open in 2018, and I've had a really hard time coping with that.
In an emotional post, the 23-year-old describes herself as an introvert and details her anxiety at public speaking. France's tennis body expressed their regret at Osaka's withdrawal.
We are sorry and sad for Naomi Osaka. We remain very committed to all athletes' well-being and to continually improving every aspect of players' experience in our tournament.
American tennis icon Serena Williams also expressed her support for Osaka.
I feel for Naomi. I feel like I wish I could give her a hug. Everyone is different and everyone handles things differently. So, you just have to let her handle it the way she wants to.
Last Wednesday, Naomi Osaka pronounced she wouldn't be doing press interviews to preserve her mental sanity. The 4 Grand Slam events, Wimbledon, the French, Australian and US Open, said Sunday they had written to Osaka to check on her well-being and offer support.
Well, before we go to our panel, let's cross to tennis journalist Chris Bowers, who's covering the matches still going on live at Roland Garros. Your latest book, a biography of world number 1 Novak Djokovic, who's on court later in the night session. Thank you for speaking with us here. What do you make of Naomi Osaka's decision to withdraw?
It sort of made sense of the whole thing, which didn't make sense until last night. If that sounds a bit odd, what I mean by that is that although she had some reasonable points about how press conferences are conducted, it didn't seem to make sense that the press conferences would be at the center of all this. And we felt in the media that there was either something serious going on in her life, or she was being very, very badly advised. And in a way, I think last night she came clean by saying, look, I am struggling with something here, and therefore I need to take a step back. And as far as I can see, that is a fair assessment, because she benefits financially and in other ways from being number 2 in the world in a sport with a tremendous amount of exposure. I mean, there's nothing really to make the number 2 in the world, or any number in the tennis rankings, better as an athlete than the number 2 in badminton or squash or other sports. It's just that tennis is better marketed. Tennis has more exposure. And part of that exposure is that they attend press conferences. The players attend press conferences after every match, if they're requested. And therefore, by saying she wouldn't be part of that, she was effectively saying, I am cherry-picking aspects of the exposure deal, which really isn't on. Now, if she's got problems, there's a lot of sympathy for her if she's had difficulties. And one of the things that the media has to recognize, and the International Tennis Writers Association made this clear in a letter to her agent, that actually just because you're good at hitting a tennis ball backwards and forwards across the net and have good fitness and good match technique doesn't mean that you are necessarily cut out to be a person on whose every word the world will hang. And therefore, it is a side effect for being a top-level athlete that they never chose. On the other hand, it is part of the deal which gives them a good living. And therefore, if she's struggling, she needs to take a step back and sort her problems out, which is what she did last night. So in many ways, it made sense of the decision that she announced last week, which always seemed to be a little bit of a smokescreen for something.
Just very briefly before we let you get back to your coverage, Chris, in the past, what's Naomi Osaka been like at press conferences?
Oh, she's been terrific. I mean, she's actually one of the most popular for press conferences, partly because, she said she's introverted, but I think she's also somebody who speaks very openly, and she's not averse to having a bit of fun. There was a case a few years back at the US Open when a slightly humorless American journalist said to her, well, you're from Osaka and your surname is Osaka. Are those two linked? And she said, oh, yes, well, in my country, you have to take the surname of the city that you're from. And the journalist said, what, really? And she said, no, I was having a joke with you. So she's not averse to having that bit of fun. And in a way, I'd rather assume that she'd found a way of dealing with it. I don't think any of the players would choose to do a press conference if they didn't have to, but plenty of players say, okay, it's an obligation, therefore we have to do this, therefore let's build it into our post-match routine. And for some of them, especially when they've been defeated, it can be quite cathartic. But Naomi's certainly gone down very well, has been popular, and I don't think she's been badly treated. I think it's worth remembering there are 2 core constituent groups of journalists at a press conference. They're the locals for whom the tennis circus has come to town, and there are the travelling journalists. But occasionally, and in particular at Wimbledon, there are journalists who are there just to catch the gossip. And I think it's possible she's had a bad experience with 1 or 2 people who are looking for the gossip there. And maybe she just hasn't quite learned how to deal with that, and that press buttons that she has elsewhere. But she remains one of the most popular players in press conferences. She remains one of the most popular among the press and among other players.
Right. Many thanks, Chris Bowers, covering the French Open tennis tournament, for speaking with us from Roland Garros. Interesting, Michael Payne, picking up on that point about the difference between those who follow the sport all year round and those who are there because it's a big event. I know from covering the Olympics that you get that same mix for things like athletics and swimming when you're at the Olympics. There's of course that notorious incident back in 1981 when John McEnroe at a press conference at Wimbledon walks out when they ask him a question about his girlfriend, and the British and American journalists actually start a fist fight with each other. Michael Payne, your thoughts on what it means to have the post-match press conference?
I think Chris Bowers sort of underlined the key point. It's part of the deal between the athletes and the media. The athletes depend on the oxygen that the media give to give the profile for the sport, their profile. It leads them to endorsements. And so across all sports now, from tennis to Formula One to the Olympics, there is a post-event press conference. But I think we also have to recognize the intensity of the media coverage has just continued to grow and grow and grow. And social media has made it only more intense. And if you're living under the spotlight 24/7 and you're competing at the highest levels and the stress and strain that takes, and then you step off the sports field into what could often be a feeding frenzy of media chasing headlines, chasing the next deadline, something had to give. And I think this was just waiting to happen. And over the coming weeks and months, I think there will be a very intense debate about what should be the right balance. The athletes have got to engage with the media, but there has to be a time where they can say, look, I'm just mentally not up for it. I need a break. Do I have to do a press conference every day? Or can we agree that there's some moderation here? And I think, this evening's debate will begin that whole discussion as to where this is going to go.
Yeah, halftime's changed is a question we'll put. But Simon Harding, you and I have bemoaned enough times when there's been, not just tennis, an important football match where you see the athletes walk past the microphones and only give answers over their Instagram account or whatever, or to whatever tabloid they have an exclusive contract with.
It's certainly a difficult situation because particularly with mental health, you need to be very careful about how you approach the topic. And first and foremost, I think it's sad, really, that it's come to this, that the number 2 player in the world has or feels that she has to step back from tennis in order to get a break. I think, and I agree with everything that's been said so far about this is part of the job. Naomi Osaka is the highest earning female athlete in the world. And that is also because of her media exposure, because of her sponsorships and things like this. Another important fact is there's never been a hint that she wasn't okay. And I think in regards to what's happened over the last week, there was before the statement that she put out yesterday and the initial statement that she put on Wednesday, which people viewed with unfairness. And I think that the way the tennis authorities reacted to that initial statement was very fair because you have an obligation to fulfill your media duties. If you don't do that, it's not fair. It's not fair on the other competitors. And the question that I pose in this situation is, this is becoming very high profile because it is Naomi Osaka. But if this was a player who was ranked 400th in the world, who had the same exact reaction, would there be as much scrutiny as there is? And that is, I think, also one of the big questions.
Nita Wiggins?
So much to say on this. First of all...
Do you agree with Simon that the rules, there has to be a level playing field between the athletes?
The way I want to attack it, so I can get my point across, is that it's not unheard of for an athlete to say, I'm not interested in doing the interviews. I covered the NBA Finals with the Bulls in Seattle Supersonics, and during that time, some athletes did not do the post-game interviews. They were fined. I covered the Dallas Mavericks and Miami Heat NBA Finals. Some players did not do they were fined for not appearing. And when we look at this situation, when a person says, my mental health is on the line and I'm not going to do interviews, to me, that seems to be the starting point. Self-care. And
and those are the words she used, self-care.
Yes. And we often say that she is a player of Japanese origins. She is Japanese and Haitian, as she likes to explain. And the experts can tell us, and they do tell us, that there is trauma that can be inherited. And we can all consider that in the Haitian community generations back, and in Japanese communities generations back, there was trauma. And if you are a person of Japanese and Haitian heritage, and you say, I am in a situation where I need to back away from my public role, we as civilized people need to take the person at face value and say, your life, your well-being are much more important than being on the court and helping with the sponsorship and the endorsements and all the money that comes from the event.
So it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because then what do? Do you lift the rules? And you heard at the outset Chris Bowers say that one of the reasons tennis is such a success is because the players speak to the press. So what do? Do you scrap the rules completely? What's the fair way to go about it?
I never say anything is 100%. So why would I say scrap the rules? I would say, let's evaluate this situation for what it is. It is a woman's plea for privacy, for time to step back, for time to take care of herself. I don't feel there needs to be a rewriting of the rules. Let's be mature journalists, sponsors, tournament directors, and say, this person is a person before she is a money-making machine for brands. If she needs to do something other than compete and answer questions, I say give her the time because she's asking for it.
Karsten Witt Larsen, would you say that the pressure is greater than it used to be, the way that Michael Payne did?
I agree. The pressure is increasing. Elite sport is big business, high politics. It's a lot of stress, pressure, a lot of expectations, a lot of demands. We have to take care of the mental health of elite athletes. In this case, Naomi, we need to take care of her well-being. Let's take the case if we kept on, or the media kept on pressuring her expectations and something better happened than her withdrawing, that would be a disaster, I think. So we have to take care of the mental health of elite athletes.
We're going to pick up on that point. We have to take a very quick break. We'll be back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're asking about world number 2, Naomi Osaka, pulling out of the French Open, citing mental health reasons, bouts of depression and anxiety as why she didn't want to attend post-match press conferences. We're talking about it with France 24 sports editor Simon Harding, journalist Nita Wiggins, author of Civil Rights Baby, My Story, of Race, Sports, and Breaking Barriers in American Journalism. From Lisbon, Karsten Witt Larsen, sports psychologist for Danish Super League team FCN and Denmark's national football youth team. And from Verbier in Switzerland, Michael Payne, former director of marketing at the International Olympic Committee, whose new book, Tune In, the unofficial and entirely unsanctioned history of the Olympics, it comes out this Thursday. Messages of support for Naomi Osaka are pouring in from all over. Tennis legend Billie Jean King stating it's incredibly brave that Osaka has revealed her truth about her struggle with depression. That doesn't necessarily mean that all in the tennis world agree with missing post-match press conferences.
I understand her, but in the other hand, for me, I mean, without the press, without the people who normally is traveling or are counting, are writing the news and the achievements that we are having around the world, probably we will not be the athletes that we are today.
Karsten Witt Larsen, your reaction?
I think we need to take care of the mental health in this case. I think we need to look at it from a perspective of Naomi Osaka, that it might be that you're not able to attend the press conferences, and it's something that is part of the contract. But nevertheless, we have to take care of her mental health at this point. So I think we need to look at this a bit more from different perspectives. So when it's the case of her struggling with depression and anxiety, we need to be able to draw a line saying that at this point, there's a case in which we need to take care and responsibility as organizations or as media or as professionals for her mental health. And I agree that, of course, when possible, you need to be able to fulfill your obligations and your contract regarding during press conferences. But we need to draw a line also when it's a matter of protecting the mental health of the elite athlete.
So, Michael Payne, what could the procedure be? In this instance, Osaka announced last week publicly she wouldn't be going to press conferences. What's the way this can happen in a way that's not confrontational and that protects her mental health, the way Karsten just suggested?
Well, I think you're going to have to evolve to a situation where there is an acknowledgement that if an athlete is ill, if they were sick, if they had the flu, they wouldn't be able to attend the press conference and there would be an exemption given. I don't think any top athlete is opposed to engaging and speaking with the media. They all know it comes as part of the job. But there will be times when the athlete is ill, whether it's a physical illness or a mental illness, where there should be the opportunity to sort of step away. It's not something they can do at every press conference, every event. But if you have a medical certificate to say, look, there's a break for 2 weeks or a month, I think there has to be some form of scenario. It cannot be as black and white. If you don't turn up, there's a fine next. And I think that's, maybe Naomi's sort of cry for help was to say, look, there needs to be a bit of a middle ground here.
Simon Harding?
Naomi Osaka herself has said that she wants to take the time, step back, and then come back and work with the tour. And this is, I think, very important because her initial message was one of just rebuking the rules and not making a statement clear. And I think with the statement that we saw before, Francois, Naomi Osaka stepping back from the tournament in itself is admitting in a way that the way she initially put out the information was wrong. Because from the moment her statement came out last Wednesday, the WTA, Roland Garros organisers, did reach out to her. They asked, what is wrong? And she did not open up. The moment she has opened up, we have seen this wave of support. We have seen, as we saw in the report before, the head of the French Federation say, Naomi, take the time you need. We hope to see you next year. So I agree with Nida that I think we need to take this case by case because Serena Williams, it wasn't in that extract, but said, I have thick skin, so I can deal with this. Rafael Nadal is saying, I have to take it with the territory. So we have to go case by case. But there does need to be an instance where it has to be fair for everyone. It comes back to that issue of fairness. They are top athletes. And we cannot forget, we can say as much as we want, yes, they don't have to take part in media. Yes, they're not money-making machines. And that's true. But they are in this business. Unfortunately, it comes with the territory. There are a lot of very good journalists, and in fact, Osaka apologized to those journalists, saying that if I've hurt everyone, because the overlying reaction has been one of shock. But people are upset. So what have we done to upset her so much? And this has to be taken in consideration. There are, of course, incompetent journalists, nasty journalists, like there are in every profession.
All right. And she mentioned, by the way, in that long statement, that 2018 U.S. Open final, first Grand Slam ever won by a Japanese. She was 20 years old, and it was overshadowed by the massive row between hometown favorite Serena Williams and the chair umpire who penalized the American for getting coaching instructions from the stands. During the trophy presentation, Williams had to intervene to get fans to stop booing, and Osaka, in her victory speech, said, quote, I know that everyone was cheering for Serena, and I'm sorry it had to end like this.
And how traumatic is that? That you're a 20-year-old, you've always wanted to win a Grand Slam, you love your sport. The fact that you can be the first person from your country to do that isn't even an added plus. And you win it and you're booed winning it. And then in that situation, so I can totally understand there's been trauma behind that. It would be traumatic, surely, for anyone that happens. But then where do you trace the origin of that? Is it the way that it was handled by the crowd at the US Open? Was it the umpire and Serena Williams who behaved in that? So how do you attribute blame? You can't, I think. And again, it comes back to the framework. From now on, as Carsten said, as Michael said, I think the rules will change. There will be more leeway. There will be talks with organisation who will probably have more thorough checks on mental health. We'll ask, are you okay? But you can only take those answers at face level.
Tennis is not a team sport, Nina Wiggins.
Right.
And that's an important factor in all of this. So you're under intense pressure.
Yes.
Osaka, with that win in 2018, she bursts onto the scene. And what we get from that statement today is the sense that, wow, it was perhaps a lot to handle.
Of course, when an athlete explodes at that level and succeeds in that way, but let's make this a bigger conversation. We're talking about elite athletes and elite competition, but let's look at her life away from the game. Naomi Osaka and Michael Brown, who was killed by police officer Darren Wilson in 2014, they are practically the same age. If Michael Brown had lived. And before Michael Brown was killed, Trayvon Martin was killed. And so when we have an athlete who is in a high-pressure situation...
And she's spoken out on in support of the Black Lives Matter movement.
We know that she is an activist for these causes, but when we look at the crucible that she was in 2018, and we look at other situations that probably weighed on her spirit, touched her beyond, can I take home the trophy? I would say that part of any person's decision to back away comes from beyond the game, the competition, the promotion at a job. And if I have the time, I'd like to give an example. We talk about Emmett Till, who was killed in the United States 80 years ago. My father was 17 when Emmett Till was 14. My father told me about the trauma of that. And so when we look at these athletes who are trying to perform and hoping to meet their obligations, there is often something beyond, am I serving fast enough? Am I doing a correct two-handed backhand? Let's look at this person beyond the chalk lines at Roland Garros.
Carsten Vidlarsen, you confirm that trauma can be triggered by anything or many things.
Yes, I agree. There's a lot of different stressors or events that can trigger depression or trauma as well. It can be from being part of a special environment or an organization. It could be part of the matches, the competition. It could be part of a situation with a coach or something like that. So there's a lot of different perspectives that we need to consider when protecting the mental health of the athlete.
And is there on that score something particular to tennis? Because even when you're not Haitian, Japanese, and moving to America to practice your trade, you're in this bubble from the age of 8 sometimes, and it's a pressure cooker.
It is indeed, and therefore we need to consider the perspective or the long perspective in it as well. And even though that winning a match like that in 2018 in America but being booed at from the audience as well, is something we need to consider. For instance, we know the Olympic blues after big events and you achieve something great, for instance, and I would imagine after an event like this and in this perspective, we need to consider that this was or could be a trauma for her as well that has triggered depression and anxiety afterwards that is not really helping her now. So afterwards, we need to consider the different events that comes from now on that she needs to take care of, and she needs a lot of support to be able to go forward as well.
And she also has perhaps the weight of a nation on her shoulders. She's been getting get well message statements of support from Japan, from the Tennis Association, but also from big name sponsors. Simon mentioned how much she has in terms of sponsorship deals. Fans who are pinning their hopes on Osaka for a medal at the Summer Olympics, scheduled for Tokyo, weighing in on her decision to quit the French Open. Let's listen.
She has an obligation to do the interviews, regardless of whether she wins or loses. Ignoring that makes her slightly selfish. But then again, she has an illness. I really don't know what to say.
I think the media is making too much commotion. They shouldn't make such a big deal out of this. The media should take better care of her.
Michael Payne, the Olympics happening in Tokyo, is that an added layer of pressure for Naomi Osaka?
Absolutely. I think you've seen with every games where you have the expectation that your iconic star athlete is going to bring home the gold, I remember back at the Sydney Olympic Games, there was the Aborigine athlete Kathy Freeman, who was the symbol. And for the year leading up to the Games, she was held as being the icon. And she also then went on to light the Olympic flame. I don't think anybody can sort of understand the pressure that is going under the athlete. And in this case, dealing with an Olympics, there's only going to be one opportunity, one Olympic Games on your home territory. It's not like another tennis tournament where, okay, if I don't win this week, I'll pick up and come back again next week. So there will be a culmination of pressures just building up, like a pressure cooker, and something suddenly just went pop and said, "Hang on, I need time out. I need to breathe." And it'll be interesting to see how in the next few weeks, whether with this break, she is able to come back and compete in Tokyo and be a symbol and icon of the Japanese success for these games.
Simon Harding?
We keep talking about the pressure on the athlete. Again, I need to hammer this home. The pressure comes with the territory. I think Naomi Osaka's done the right thing in the sense that if she stepped back from the sport, and that's her way of dealing it, then that's fine. But I think if she is in tennis and if she wants to continue playing and continue being a top athlete, and if she doesn't, then fair enough. But she is going to have to deal with these kinds of pressures. The sport is not going to change just for Naomi Osaka. I think it could adapt. Things could be tweaked, but it's not. We're talking about pressure of Naomi Osaka's loved all the way around the world. It's not like David Beckham in the '98 World Cup. Well, dummies of him being hanged in England or bullets put through his letterbox after he was sent off against Argentina. We're talking about different kinds of pressure. So I don't want to trivialize anything she's been through. But again, you are a symbol and a role model for so many people because of what you do and how good you are and the fact that sports is something that brings people together. So yes, again, she has this mental health issue that she's now made public. And I think now we need to move on. Let's leave her to take care of her problems. Let her get the help from people who can give her the help. But tennis is going to move on, as it is doing in Roland Garros. Roland Garros hasn't stopped because Naomi Osaka has left. Roland Garros is going to keep on going.
As Simon says, sports does bring people together. But with this discussion about the Olympics this year, there actually has been quite a division. And I don't know which side Naomi Osaka is on as far as the Olympics in Japan, but some people who don't want the Olympics there are concerned, obviously, about the pandemic. We have 13,000 deaths related to COVID in Japan. And so who's to say whether that is or is not another weight on the shoulders of this athlete? And so, again, I always say, listen to what the person is saying. And the NBA player, Paul George, when the NBA was in the bubble, Paul George talked about the depression and isolation of playing in the NBA bubble. But sponsors and broadcasters thought it was a great success. So people didn't listen to what the athletes said. And I would just always want to step forward and let the athlete share without fear of penalty for being honest.
Michael Payne, it must be difficult for Naomi Osaka. After all, you have the Japanese government, which has sided with the IOC, maintaining the games despite the very low vaccination rates in Japan so far. And Naomi, who knows that public opinion in Japan is squarely in favor of another postponement. Your thoughts on that?
It's a very fluid situation. I think there is slow confidence building that the games will be staged in a safe and secure environment. The build up to every Olympic Games is unique. Even if you go back to one of the most successful games ever, which was Tokyo in 1964, the Japanese people were very nervous and didn't want those games to take place because they thought they weren't yet ready. They weren't ready to step out on the world stage. They went on to be one of the most successful games ever and an iconic moment in Japan's history. So all of these things come together. So I agree with your colleagues. It is a responsibility of the athlete to engage with the media. They can't deny that responsibility. It's the fuel that's giving them all of the revenue, all of their endorsements. But equally, there's got to be a middle ground here that can deal with special one-off cases for a particular moment in time. It's not you're given a blank check to avoid all future engagement with the media.
But could Naomi Osaka be feeling the pressure from all of this, from this this conflict that's happening?
I think everything will be driving the pressure. I mean, the expectation for her to perform in Tokyo. I mean, she came out with an interview a couple of weeks ago saying how much she was looking forward to competing at the Olympic Games, how much it meant for her to compete in the host country. But she was also respecting and sympathetic to the feelings of the Japanese people. And I think there's a lot of confusion out there. And, you know, it's a lot to ask for any individual who is being held as a role model to sort of speak up for the nation. They're not quite sure which way to turn. They're sort of saying, well, can't you just leave me to go back to the sports field? Let me talk about my tennis. Let me talk about when I've got a good day or a bad day on court. And yet, you know, the demands from the media is they want to hear her opinion on everything. And she can say, well, hang on, you know, I don't know. But that's not an acceptable answer.
Naomi Osaka, who communicates like many of her peers these days over social media. We can show you images from her Instagram account there, which include that statement you saw, plus, you know, fashion pictures and the like. She's also in an upcoming 3-part Netflix documentary series that premieres in July. So, Karsten Vidlarsen, you know, we've talked on this show about how living in the age of social media, where everybody can build their own persona, be they famous or not, it takes a toll sometimes on your mental health. In the case of Naomi Osaka, do you lose your identity a little bit when you're the one always trying to curate and craft who you are over social media?
Sorry, you broke out in the last of your question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, do you lose a little bit your identity when you're always having to craft and curate your own who you are publicly like this?
Possibly. Of course, it's very demanding just being an elite athlete. You have a one-sided identity being a sportswoman, and also there's a lot of perspectives from social media and the demands or the expectations of who you should be. So it takes a toll. Also being part of that world, being involved in social media. So therefore, it is really important from a psychological perspective to be grounded or rooted or having solid values regarding who you are and what characterizes you, and being clear of that, because that's your foundation on which you stand upon when you're facing a lot of difficulties. And I tried supporting elite athletes at the Olympics in Rio, and the amount of pressure just being in that event, and I expect being from her perspective, being in her home country, it would be crazy amount of pressure and thousands of messages each day, expectations regarding performing at her best. So in combination with the event and social media, it's something she needs to take care of, and she needs to work with someone.
I was going to say, we're going to conclude with breaking news. The heads of the 4 major Grand Slam tournaments in tennis coming out with a common statement saying they're going to try to address these issues of mental health. In a separate statement, the head of the International Tennis Federation saying the sport will review what needs to evolve. I want to thank you, Karsten Vidlarsen, for joining us from Lisbon. I want to thank Michael Payne in Verbier, Switzerland, Nita Wiggins, Simon Harding. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.